Hello, I'm Mark Price. I'd like to talk to you today about missing the miracles for the miracle. But first, there was a mouse and a cat that died. They went up to pet heaven, animal heaven, and the mouse went first, and Peter met him at the entrance and said, "You've been a good mouse. I checked your record. You were terrific, so welcome to heaven. Is there anything you'd like?" And the mouse said, "Well," he said, "I looked around. It's beautiful, but I've been walking around on these small little legs of mine for all of my life, and I noticed heaven is a very, very big place. Is there any way I could have something to help me get around heaven a little bit easier?" Peter thinks a minute. He said, "Roller skates. How would you like some roller skates?" Mouse said, "Oh, that would be great. Roller skates." "Yes," the mouse said. So Peter gives the mouse roller skates and he toodles off, does his thing. Well, a while later, the cat comes to heaven. Peter looks him up and says, "Well, you've been a good cat. You've been a good friend to everyone on earth. You've been a terrific cat. Welcome to heaven. You've earned the right to be here." He said, "Have you looked around?" And the cat said, "I looked. This is beautiful. I imagined heaven was beautiful, but I could not even imagine how beautiful heaven was." And Peter says to the cat, "Is there anything you need? We want you to be happy and comfortable here." He says, "No." He says, "Everything is perfect." He said, "I especially like those meals on wheels." There you go. Heaven has everything for everybody, I guess, except for the mouse. So I want to talk to you today about missing the miracles for the miracle. We have a story in today's gospel from the gospel writer, the evangelist John, who tells us about the multiplication of the loaves, the loaves of bread and the fish, and multiplying them to feed thousands. We know that a story in the Bible is important if it's repeated. And this particular story of the multiplication of the loaves and the feeding of the multitudes has been repeated 6 times in the New Testament. Each gospel has a version, and then 2 of the gospels tell it a second time. It's a little bit different in each of them, but still it's the same story. Jesus takes the loaves, the fish, and multiplies them so it feeds whatever the number of people are. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read that there are 5,000 there, 5,000 people there, not counting women and children. And we know from our history, just like today, there are many more, a very much higher percentage of women usually going to church or attending things of church than there are men. So some scientists, some theologians, some Bible scholars believe that there weren't just 5,000, but if you add in the women and children, there were maybe 20,000 there. So Jesus, with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, fed 20,000 people mainly that particular day. It's a phenomenal story. It's a wonderful story. It's a miracle of God. John, interestingly, refers to miracles as signs. You see, every miracle in the Bible, every miracle, every sign from God in the Bible has a couple of purposes. One, of course, is to deal with whatever the underlying issue or problem was. In this case, it's feeding the many, many thousands of people that were there listening to Jesus. But there's always a second purpose, and the second purpose is important. The second purpose is to direct us to God. Whether you call it a miracle or a sign, its purpose is to direct us to God, to remind us of God, the creator of all things and the one responsible for the miracles. Too often, however, we spend time just focused on the miracle, the grandiose gesture, the bringing somebody back from the dead, the raising, as we remember the story, raising Lazarus from the dead, or the healing of the blind man, or the deaf who gain their hearing. We always are focused more on the great miracle, the grand gesture. And when we do that, we're missing all of the small miracles that are happening along the way. There is nothing wrong with acknowledging, seeing the great miracle, Jesus bringing the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt, out of slavery, and saving them. And then, of course, they're wandering the desert, but he got them out. He parted the Red Sea. He gave them, when they were hungry, gave them manna, bread in the desert. They were thirsty, he gave them water springing out of rocks. So miracle after miracle God performs. But if all we do is focus on the great miracle, that big thing, then we're missing, as I said, all of the little miracles that happen along the way, preceding and after the miracles. Many miracles happen. And I suggest to you that all of the miracles, big or small, are important, and they all have the purpose of pointing us to God, to reminding us of God, the creator of all things, and the one responsible for all the miracles, all the signs, big or small. Let's not forget that when the Israelites were wandering the desert after having the Red Sea parted for them so they could escape, and they were hungry and God gave them the bread, and they were thirsty, God gave them the water, it was not long later that they ended up focusing on themselves and not on God. Remember, the purpose of the miracle is to bring us to a focus on God, to bring us to a closer relationship with God, to acknowledge who God is. So they stopped focusing on God and they started looking for gods elsewhere, and they built these golden calves. So what happens when we lose sight of all of the signs that God gives us in the world around us is we start looking for God elsewhere. That's why so many people are looking to the world to give them their God, to give them the things that they think that they wanted, the thing that they need. And it's not because God is not present, and it's not because God is not providing miracles or signs in their life. It's just they're not looking for them. They keep waiting for the big miracle, that big thing to happen. If we focus ourselves as people who, even people of faith, people who are looking solely for the big miracle, then we're no better than the patrons, the customers at a circus. And God is no better than a circus performer. We are waiting for God to perform his next big magic act. And that's not the nature of God, and that's not the nature of who we are. So in our lives, let us enjoy, appreciate, expect the big miracles, but let us also focus on those little miracles along the way, and all of them, the thousands of them. You see, there's so much depression in the world, and part of the reason for depression is people feel they're all alone. They feel that nothing is going right. And I suggest to you, if we open our minds, we open our eyes, we open our hearts to all the little miracles, then there will be less depression, because we will see for ourselves that God is there with us always. Couple examples. I was in an automobile accident, as many of you know, back in October 11th of 2020. Rollover car, went off the side of a cliff. The car rolled many times. I ended up breaking my neck. All 7 vertebrae are fused now. And my hand I nearly lost. They had to do many operations to save my hand. So the first great miracle is I survived this thing. I died twice along the way, but I was brought back and I survived the miracle. But how about all the other miracles? How about the miracles of the doctors who operated on me? How about the miracles of the ambulance people? How about the miracles of the police who first got me out of the car and saved me at that point? How about the miracle of those who did all the different operations, the nurses, all the people who took care of me? How about the miracle of the wonderful angel who allowed me into her house for 3 months after the hospital released me, and she took care of me to make sure that I was recovering? How about the miracle of my sister, who during COVID was in the hospital every single day for the nearly 3 weeks I was on life support with tubes for breathing and for eating? Miracle after miracle after miracle were all part of this great grand miracle of God. Years ago I had a heart attack, a massive heart attack. I've had a couple since, sadly, but I had this massive heart attack. And so the miracle, of course, is the great miracle, I survived it. Well, I happened to be in the hospital when I had the heart attack. So there's a side miracle. I was in the right place to have a heart attack. They were able to quickly work on me. I had great doctors who were there for me. I had great nurses who were there for me. But there was another miracle, an answer to a prayer of mine that I did not expect. But I view it now, afterwards, in retrospect, as another one of those many miracles. The big one is I was saved from the heart attack, but the other miracles are important also. My prayer was answered because when the heart attack was resolved and I was recovering in my hospital bed, the doctors, or I think 2 or 3 of them, were there at the foot of my bed when I woke up. And one of them said to me, he said, Mark, did you know that when we were putting you under to go and deal with the heart attack you were having, you were in the midst of your heart attack, you said a prayer, and you said it out loud. And I said, no, it doesn't surprise me. I always try to go to God. What did I say? And they said, you said to God, I'm ready. You said, God, I'm ready. You want me now? I'm ready to go. I trust you. I love you. I'm ready to go. I'd like to stay around long enough to see what happens with my daughter, but if it's your will, I'm ready to go. So why was this a miracle to me? Why was it an answer to my prayer? Well, for 50 years, I've been telling people that there is a God, that there is a creator God. He does exist, and that there is a heaven, there is a hell, and when we die, we're going to go to one or the other. So I've been telling people that, but I also have learned that we don't really know if we truly believe until we are in that place where the rubber meets the road. So here I was, in the midst of a massive heart attack, being put under, and I'm saying a prayer out loud, and what is my prayer? I believe in you, God. Take me. If it's your will, take me. The reason that I believe was a miracle, because it said to me, Mark, what you've been telling people for 50 years is right. I do exist. There is a heaven, there is a hell, and you do believe. So I know now more than ever, thanks to that horrible heart attack, that I truly believe when I'm telling people, when I say there is a heaven, there is a hell, and we will go to one or the other. So in today's gospel, what might be the other miracles? Well, we know that there were multitudes of people, thousands of people listening to Jesus. Jesus says, let's feed them. They said, we don't have anything. We don't have enough money. It would cost 200 days' wages to feed all these people. Jesus asked, well, what do you have? What do we have here in the way of food? They said, we have 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. Jesus says, tell everyone to sit down, put the loaves of bread and the fish in a basket. Bring me the basket. Jesus blessed it. And then they passed the basket up and down through the thousands of people that were there. And this gospel reading tells us that when they had finished, when everybody had eaten, when everybody had had enough to eat, they filled up 12 wicker baskets from the scraps. 12 wicker baskets were filled up from the scraps, from what was left of 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish after feeding thousands, perhaps 20,000 people. Now, this is a miracle of God. We see it as a miracle. We see it, as John calls it, a sign from God. This is the greatness of God, that he will meet our needs. He will be there for us. Whatever we give or we offer, with the help of God, it will be multiplied. But maybe there were other miracles happening as well. Little miracles that we don't want to miss. Maybe, just maybe, those people who were sitting there were so moved by Jesus' teaching, all of his teaching that he had done that day and the days prior. The teaching about caring for the poor, caring for the hungry. The teaching about loving each other, loving God and loving one another. His teachings about being there for each other. His teachings about the only way we can love God is by loving one another. How about we are responsible for those people that God puts in our life? How about blessed are the poor, for they shall be comforted? Isn't it possible that maybe, just maybe, one of the little miracles, one of the many other miracles that happened, in addition to the great grand miracle of God, this sign from God, could be that people who had very little of their own reached into their own knapsacks, reached into what they were carrying, and as the basket went down to feed them and to feed everybody, they were putting the little bit they had into the basket. So maybe, just maybe, the miracle of God and the feeding the multitudes was the great grand miracle of God, but it was also made up with and by thousands of other miracles of people sharing their heart, sharing what they had with others. People who were moved and transformed by God to be people who love God and who love each other. Isn't that possible? So let us be people who never miss all of the miracles for the sake of the miracle. Let's look beyond that big miracle and look for all the daily miracles, the daily signs of God, and use those miracles on a daily basis to bring us closer to God, closer in our relationship to God through Jesus Christ. Amen? This is Mark Price. Thanks for listening.